Here we go with the Quattro trigger one more time. There's people having problems. I don't know what they're doing wrong, but I'm going to make this film here. The other videos show you how to work on the Sears, take everything apart, how to reassemble, how to clean and polish and take the gray matter off your trigger parts. So here's another thing we're going to do here. So here's your Quattro trigger. And you see right here in the little window, the Sears are not engaged. To engage the Sears so you can get it ready to fire, you grab the middle Sear right here through the slot. Push it back. That'll allow the upper Sear here to drop down because the upper Sear is under spring tension. Then you can fire it. So you just fired. Reset it again. Watch the trigger because you're going to be having your hands on it, so you got to keep your hands kind of clear. Push the Sear back, the upper Sear drops, let go, and she's engaged. So let's get into this real quick. This is what the middle Sear looks like. And the middle Sear sits right inside like that and engages with the upper Sear, and the upper Sear engages right here like this. So your engagement will look like that. The more you screw your second stage screw in, which is the screw closest to the barrel, the more this engagement here between the two Sears will spread. It will push this down here like this and get further and further away until they're barely engaged, and then she will move out of the way and she will fire. So if you replace the screw with a longer screw than what you had from the factory, if you had these type of screws, the Allen screws obviously have no heads on them, and you can screw them to where your gun's not going to misfire on you. And that's exactly what happens when you screw your screw in too far. It pushes this down, and then the engagement is no longer like this, it's like this, and you're going to have a mishap. So you can see this is what you want to see through this window, how much engagement you have when you're screwing this screw in. Now this screw here towards the butt of the stock is your travel screw. That's your screw that's going to go like this. So let me get rid of this so you can see in real time, so to speak, the real Sear, what happens. So here, the two Sears are ready to fire. This one is holding back this one. You go to push your trigger down, your travel. When you do that, you'll see the Sear starts to move up and out of the way. So when your end of travel is over, you still have a little bit of engagement left. You can feel the stop on this, right? See that Sear moving back and forth? So there's your travel. You didn't fire yet. That's good. You still got a little bit of engagement there that's holding that Sear back. Then you go to fire and pull the trigger back a little bit more, and she fires. So here's the slot. Push that back. Get your hand off this trigger. Let it drop. On this piece here, on that middle Sear, looks like that. This is what, when you through the slot, this is what you're catching here, this little ridge. You're pushing it back like that, out of the way. Then the upper Sear that's under tension will drop down when this is out. Otherwise it can't drop down. So that's what happens. You push this back, this drops down, then you can let this back, and they're engaged like that. Push the trigger down, it pushes this edge down, it forces this up, and then she fires. Now the other thing with the Quattro trigger is this is your tension. You want to take this screw right here and you screw it down. It hits the trigger block. when it hits the trigger block, it's going to push away now. So this will go up, this side will go down. This is the side that has the little spring that pushes into the upper sear. So it looks like this. Here's that part that's in here with the Allen. See, it comes at the bottom, and when you screw this Allen in, it hits this, pushing this away. When this end gets pushed away, this end goes down like a seesaw. And that puts that tension between here and there. Here's your little tension spring. Catch it, it goes inside that little tit, and it goes right inside the little shoe area. Like that. So again, when you screw this screw in, it hits this. This will go up, this will go down. And the more tension you make with that screw, the more tension you put on that sear. Now this is what you want. It's a full moon out there, and I can tell you, I can vouch for that. You want this tension, you can undo the tension so you start from scratch. You want this so when you pull your trigger with the travel and you see that sear moving away from the middle sear, you want your tension so that it when you let go, your trigger comes back and that upper sear drops back down in place where it was. There it is now. You use your travel, the trigger sear's moving, and now if you let go, it goes back. If you don't have enough tension, that's not going to push that back in place. Also, when you cock the rifle, it may not drop down because that's what's pushing that sear down. So this is wanting to recock. If there's not enough tension, it's just going to sit there loose. So you don't want too much tension because it's just makes for a horrible trigger. You want that tension to do its job. You want that sear to move back when you let go of it, and you want the trigger to move back. You don't want that trigger loose by any means. So when you just get enough tension where it's finally doing its job, add a tad more, just to be safe, and so you have some spring in that trigger. See that? Now, as far as adjustment goes, usually I found the travel screw you get with these rifles, if you have the stock cap head screw like this, socket cap heads, that's usually fine. Travel's not that much, but you can make that longer and shorten up the travel. But the main thing is, if you have a cap head screw from the factory, I think they changed them a little bit. They've gotten better. They also changed that spring. The little spring that goes in there for the tension, they used to be horrendous, but they've actually come out where they're a little lighter now. So you can use the one if you got a modern gun. And I have often found a hard clicking pen and cut my own spring out of it, but not a soft clicking pen. But you don't have to do that anymore if you get the modern guns. And here's the original one that looked like, and they were just so hard you couldn't even squeeze it. So now let's look at this trigger here. Let's just take it apart real quick, because one of the things is you're going to need to make a trigger pin so you can put your sears back and put this trigger back. The reason that you can't take this apart and expect to put this pin back in here and get this back into your rifle, because it's going to hit this. So you can't. You can take it apart, but you can't put it back in. So that's why you make up a smaller sear pin. And the pin is so that it will easily fit between the welded trigger bracket, but yet go in here and hold your sear together. So I pulled that pin out of here. We're going to drop this out. We're going to go through this as quick as we can. So here's your lower sear and your middle sear. When you engage these, make sure they're all the way back. Don't put them in there without looking and taking your time. If you move these around, then you go to looking and check them again. They go all the way back and in. All this gray matter where the contact points are, which is here, which is all here, which is up and down on the top of this, which is in here, and which is on the other sear up top. Which would be right here. See? Those are your contact points. You can even clean that off if you want. You're just getting the gray off. You're not taking away any metal, and then you're going to polish and buff these real good. They'll be nice and shiny. And these are the contact points. One, all this in here, this over here. You see that little bump in there? That is very crucial. Do not take any of that down. Just take the gray matter off. Clean that up. Clean this up. And you can clean that up if you want. Check that. See what that looks like. You never know what you're going to get sometimes from the factory. So anyway, this is what this looks like. This goes in the bottom here. When you put these together first, when you're all set and ready, you slip this in through the side like that, and you edge up to the upper sear. Look through the window, catch it. Then you can put your pin through. And then you'll wind up putting this pin in for this when you're done. But let's take these apart real quick. The first thing on that would be the trigger. The trigger's going to want to pop a little bit, so be careful. Then this guy here. And we'll take the half moon out. But half moon has that tension wire. Again, the wire goes through the hole, then it swips around this way. So when you grab this to put it in, don't grab it where your thumb hits that wire. It's going to push away from the hole when it does, and it won't line up. It's a little tricky. Then you have this middle sear. Leave this pin in like we talked about. This is the pin that is for the safety that works the other side, which is basically your thumb safety at that point. Leave that in because you're going to need that when you drop this in. So you see the shoe and the spring sits on that, and then this goes in there like that. That's what it looks like. Then this half moon will look like this. Okay? Then this comes up and just catches that, and then you put your pin in here. Then you put this one in when all the upper pieces are already together. Again, this wire, we're going to go for that right now. Pay attention to this wire, because this wire, line up the hole, get your finger off the back of that wire where it pokes through, slip it in here. There's the hole for it. This one's for your trigger, this one's for the half moon piece. We call it the half moon piece, or I call it the half moon piece because it looks like a half moon. Stick it in there. Line up the hole for the spring and your half moon. Slip the pin through both of them. Now see the wire poking around? That wire needs to go under this pin when the trigger pin goes in. That will put this in a position like this. Slightly cocked up. So I got to hold my finger under these pins or it'll fall out. They're not lubed. This is going to be tricky because when you lube your trigger parts, and you should, and all your pins to help keep rotation and movement, and everything becomes slippery. So now you put the half moon in. This piece will go in on top of the bar here and then into the half moon. It'll look like this when it's in. See that? And your half moon will be up like that a little bit. That's fine. So let me move this out of the way. Just carefully slip this in. Line up the hole. It's already out of, I have the tail in too far down, so put it in and work it over. Then put your pin in. And remember, your pins are going in the bevel. If you look inside, I missed it. So pull it back out. Just go like that. Probably need to hold it with my thumb and then slip it in where I can see it. So it goes on top of this and in the U part. And there. Beveled in. Now you got to keep, like I did, you got to keep your finger in there. So it looks to me like I got to move this out of the way and just push this down, then push this back. So now she's okay. She's in between and under this. See that? It's been a while since I worked on this, but so let's get this, let's keep going. So now you have that. Next piece is going to be this guy here. So you can put it together like that. Put the spring on the nub. Put it in your hand. Sit it on top of the notch on the upper sear. And then get a pin ready. And then slowly move this into alignment. That's the only one that gives you little problems. It probably wouldn't be so bad if you undid that screw some, but because the screw is pushing up against here, it's creating a lot of tension on that spring. But that's where this was left off at last time. So now you have these three pieces, 1, 2, and 3. You're ready to put your trigger. And what do we talk about? That little spring wire sticking up. That's in the wrong spot. So push it down below the hole here. That's the hole for your trigger pin. Put your pin trigger in there and get it ready. Just make sure that wire is below this pin when you stick the pin in. Slowly, easy, squeeze it down to line up your hole and put your pin through. Check that spring. If it's doing that, you're good. And just double check that wire, and you know it was underneath that trigger pin that we just put in. So now these are all under trigger, under spring tension, but you still got to be careful because they will fall out, or they can fall out, but not so much now that we have all these little pieces under tension. Next, you get this guy here. You're fully engaged. You're going to slip it through this way and just catch that upper sear like that. This is all lubed again, okay? And now this is just showing you. This is just going in dry. So we're putting that in. Now this block is a little tight, but just once I get this back up in the area, from that point on she's fine. So I just catch it. The two sears are just caught. I grab the pin. You can see the hole's not clear. Use the bevel pin again. Get it in there and start wiggling it, and it'll pull it to center. Grab the trigger sear pin that you made and pull this down a little bit. That's not going to be perfectly lined up either, but since your pin is a little smaller and it's beveled, it'll do the same. It will pull it to center, and you can push it through both sides. And now when you're ready, it's ready to fire. She's engaged. You're going to have to really know what your sear's doing. If you don't have good eyes, then use a magnifying glass. Don't take anything for granted. If you have a longer screw, some guys are, what I do is I carefully, when I am all done, that screw cannot be turned in anymore. I carefully grind the end of the screw down to a ball, and I smooth it as glass, smooth as glass. So it's time consuming. But in the end, nobody can mess with that screw anymore, and the trigger is adjusted to where you don't want to adjust it anymore. It's a sweet adjustment for the Quattro. And so the Quattro best works when you have minimum engagement, but it's safe. So what I mean by minimum, instead of having all this engagement, you have something like that. It's still safe. You hit your trigger for your travel. She starts to slide. You're at the end of your travel. Now you're at your second stage, and you still got a little bit left, and she fires. So once you get this done and you're happy with it, and you know what's going on with the two sears here in engagement, You've set the tension properly. It's not horrendous. It's just enough for this to do its job, and give it a tad more, right? So that the trigger goes back and that sear goes back. Just give it a tad more to play it safe, right? You can fire this, reset it. There it is, see it? Push it back. Watch your fingers on that so you're not interfering with it. This will drop down. When you install this in your gun, this has to be ready to fire. If it's not, then you're going to take it all apart again. You cannot install this in your gun unless this is cocked, ready to go. And that's pretty much it. This one towards the barrel is your sear adjustment. Do not leave a screw like that where somebody can go behind you when you sell the gun and play with that and then cause this to separate out of engagement. Guys are using washers so they can't get past a certain point. I take and painfully grind the screw down, like I said before, so that no matter what you do with an Allen wrench, I don't care how much you tighten and squeeze the death out of it, it's not going to do any more than where I had it set. What else can we talk about real quick, because we're going to be running out of time. These guns are a royal pain in the butt. Let's make no bones about it. They're not really made and designed like a German gun, obviously, to take apart and put back together. That's why I made these videos. They're a headache, and we want to try to draw the best out of them, and that takes a lot of work. You got to tune the triggers really good. You got to do everything else to the gun, including swap the springs out and the piston seals, and clean it all up. Anyhow, so what are we missing here? What did we forget? When you drop this back down in your receiver, obviously you're going to use the proper punch to go through the receiver. Remember, watch handling that trigger. You don't want to fire it when you're trying to put it all back. Your pins will be back, everything will be back. When you're all back together again, then you can fire your trigger. Okay? And now, what pin dropped out on me? This is from handling it. This pin here fell out. Well, that's no big deal. Take it back out. Make sure it's all the way engaged. This has to be engaged like that. You can't just, it's not going to be separate. You have to go like that. Slide it back in. Just catch the middle one. There's your hole. It's almost lining up. The bevel will pull it through. Here, I just lost it. I'll put it in again. Well, it's in, but it's not engaged. Now she's engaged, and then we're going to put this pin in. So use a magnifying glass if you have to. See what those sears are doing. See how much travel and what happens when you push this down for your travel. That sear starts to come up, but it's still, at the end of its travel, it's still caught and engaged. You have to know. You can't guess. You can't think. You have to know what that sear's doing. So make sure you get a good set of eyes on that. And don't have it set for a hair trigger. And right now, with my eyes, I'd have to look under the magnifying glass, but that just looks too close to failing. But if you get it under a magnifying glass, you'll see it's actually still good. It's, instead of looking like this, it's actually looking a little bit like that. So I'm at the end of my travel, and I'm now ready to squeeze the second stage, where she'll fire. So now once you put it back in your rifle, right, and it's all back together, then you fired it and the stock is on, you can cock it, load it, right? Be safe about it. Don't let go of that barrel. And then you can fine tune it, because you may have to sweeten it up a little bit more. So when you're done with this screw, so what, Mike, what do you mean fine tune it? Well, after you get it where you think it's good here on the bench, you're going to know how good it is when you go to fire it. it's going to seem probably most like a little stiffer than you thought it would be. So you can fine tune it by screwing your second stage screw in a little bit more and seeing if it makes the actual firing sequence when you hit that second stage nicer. Under any circumstances, you do not want a hair trigger. That's all on you guys. Be safe, keep your wits about you, take your time and be patient. But you do not want to reach the end of your travel. Let me load this up. You do not want to reach the end of your trigger travel and then have her go off. You want to reach the end of your trigger travel, make sure it can go back, and this goes back in place. But when you squeeze your trigger, you want to hit that stop, a little bit more pressure, then she goes off. So it's up to you. Play it safe, be safe, and then fine tune it when it's back in the gun. If you do all this stuff and you can't cock your gun, then you didn't listen to what I tried to share with you and she won't engage. This is Mike saying be safe, take care, and remember, you are the only vessel between safety of your air gun when you work on it and the next guy that gets it. So take your time and do good work. Thank you.